I'd been running for 3 months. Not from something I'd done, from something that wouldn't stop being done to me. Tonight, in this club full of souls elite, I finally stopped running. I just didn't know I was about to collide with something far more dangerous than what I was fleeing. Before we continue this story and want to see what happens next, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. Velvet Halo, Seoul's most exclusive nightclub, writhed with bodies bathed in amber and gold. Crystal chandeliers fractured light across designer suits and silk dresses, making everyone look like they belonged in a world I was only visiting. My scrubs were folded in my locker at Seoul Medical. My trauma nurse badge was tucked in my purse. Tonight, I was just another face in the crowd, or at least, that's what I'd hoped. 3 months, 92 days of feeling eyes on my back, the same silhouette across from my apartment building at dawn, the same figure lingering outside the hospital gates when my shift ended, the same shadow at the cafe where I grabbed my morning coffee, always 3 people back in line, always watching. I'd reported it 3 times, 3 separate officers, 3 identical dismissals. He's probably just another customer, miss. Seoul's a big city. Coincidences happen. Do you have any proof he's following you? Proof. As if the cold weight of a stranger's gaze wasn't evidence enough. As if the way my hands shook when I locked my apartment door each night didn't count. As if paranoia was something you could photograph and submit in triplicate. So tonight, I'd come to Velvet Halo. Not to celebrate. Not to forget. Just to disappear into the noise and heat and bodies. To be swallowed whole by a crowd where no one could single me out. Then I saw him. The man. My stalker. Standing at the bar in a nondescript gray jacket. A glass of something amber in his hand. And his eyes. Those flat, emotionless eyes, locked directly on me. My breath caught. The room tilted. I stepped backward and collided with someone's chest. Careful. The voice cut through the bass like a blade. Low, deliberate, touched with an accent that made Korean sound like silk and smoke. I turned, an apology already forming on my lips, and the words died. He wasn't what I expected in a place like this. Not flashy, not loud, but impossible to ignore. Tall, towering, really. With the kind of presence that didn't demand attention so much as command it. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it might as well have been stitched onto him. Black shirt beneath, open at the collar. No tie. Tattoos curled from his throat into the fabric like secrets he wasn't trying to hide. Just control. His face was all sharp angles and controlled intensity. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of polished obsidian. Dark. Unreadable. The kind of eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. Authority radiated from him like heat from pavement in August. The crowd seemed to part without him moving, as if even the music knew to give him space. "You look," he said, his gaze sweeping over me with clinical precision, "like you're deciding between running or screaming." I swallowed hard. Neither. Just realizing I picked the wrong place to hide. His eyes followed mine across the room to the bar, to the man watching me. Something cold and sharp flickered across his features. There and gone in a heartbeat, like a blade briefly catching light. "Your stalker?" he asked, though it didn't sound like a question. I nodded, suddenly feeling pathetic. A grown woman, a trauma nurse who'd stitched up stab wounds and held broken ribs together with her bare hands, reduced to cowering in a nightclub because she couldn't shake a shadow. The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked back at me, and for a moment, I saw something dangerous move behind those dark eyes. Not directed at me, at everything else. "Could you?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Desperate, reckless. "Could you dance with me? A stalker's watching, and I just need him to think." I stopped. Heat flooded my face. "Sorry. That was inappropriate. I don't even know you." His mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close enough to be unsettling. "You don't," he agreed, his gaze holding mine with an intensity that made my pulse stutter. "But I know his type." He extended his hand. Long fingers, manicured nails, a heavy silver watch peeking from beneath his cuff. But his palm was wrong. Calloused in places a businessman's shouldn't be. Scarred along the edge like he'd gripped something sharp too many times. A warning shiver ran down my spine. "One dance," he said softly, his voice dropping to something that felt like a promise and a threat rolled into one. Let's make sure he never looks at you again. I hesitated. Every instinct I'd honed over 3 months of paranoia screamed at me to walk away. This man was dangerous. Not might be. Was. I could feel it in the way the air around him seemed heavier. The way even the bartender's eyes skittered away when he glanced in that direction. But then I caught movement at the bar. The stalker shifting forward, setting down his glass, starting toward me. I placed my hand in the stranger's. His grip was firm, warm, and oddly steadying as he led me onto the dance floor. His other hand settled at the small of my back. Light, but commanding, guiding me through the crowd with the kind of practiced ease that said he was used to people moving out of his way. As we stepped into the golden light beneath the chandeliers, I noticed 2 men in dark suits shift positions near the pillars. Their eyes never left us. Not the club's security. Something else. I'm Amanda, I said, suddenly needing to fill the silence, to make this feel normal. Amanda Edwards. Ji-hoon, he replied. Then, after a pause that felt loaded, Han. Something about the way he said it made me think it wasn't the name he used often. Or maybe not the one he preferred. The music shifted. Something slower, more intimate. Ji-hoon pulled me closer, one hand sliding fully around my waist. His other hand caught mine, raising it between us in a position that felt formal and possessive all at once. We moved. And God help me, he knew how to lead. He's still watching, Ji-hoon murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Does that bother you? It terrifies me, I admitted. But right now, it's the first time in months I don't feel like prey. His fingers tightened slightly on my waist. You shouldn't have to feel like prey at all. Tell that to the police. The police, he said, his voice hardening in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Don't deal with men like him. I do. Before I could ask what he meant, Ji-hoon's gaze flicked up over my shoulder. One sharp, almost imperceptible nod to someone in the shadows. I started to turn, but his hand at my waist kept me in place. Don't look, he said quietly. Just dance. So I did. I let him guide me across the floor, let the music and his steady presence drown out the fear that had been my constant companion. For 3 minutes and 47 seconds, I felt safe. When the song ended, I finally glanced back at the bar. The man was gone. My stalker, the shadow who'd haunted me for 3 months, had simply vanished. Where? I started. Somewhere he won't bother you again, Ji-hoon said. His tone was casual, but his eyes held something that made my blood run cold and hot all at once. What did you do? I protected you. He released me slowly, though his hand lingered at my waist a moment longer than necessary. Isn't that what you wanted? It was. But the way he said it, the certainty, the finality, made me realize I hadn't just asked a stranger to dance. I'd asked something far more dangerous for help, and he'd answered. Ji-hoon stepped back, adjusting his cuff with casual precision. You should go home, Amanda Edwards. You're safe now. How do you know? That not quite smile returned. Because I'm the one deciding who's safe in this city. He turned to leave, and panic. Irrational, desperate panic seized me. Wait, will I see you again? Ji-hoon paused, glancing back over his shoulder. In the fractured golden light, his eyes looked almost gentle. Almost. You already are, he said quietly. You just didn't know it. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd with his suited shadows trailing behind him. I stood alone on the dance floor, my heart hammering, my hands shaking, feeling safer and more terrified than I had in months. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew 3 things. 1. My stalker was gone. 2. The man who'd made him disappear wasn't a savior. 3. I'd just traded one shadow for another. And this one, I suspected, would be much harder to escape. The fluorescent lights of Seoul Medical's trauma ward were unforgiving at 6 a.m. I stood at the nurse's station, staring at the patient chart in front of me without really seeing it. The words blurred together. Vitals, medication schedules, surgical notes, all white noise against the memory playing on loop in my head. You already are. You just didn't know it. 24 hours since Velvet Halo. 24 hours since a stranger made my stalker disappear with nothing but a nod. 24 hours since I'd felt the ghost of his hand at my waist and convinced myself it meant nothing. It had to mean nothing. Amanda. Dr. Kim's voice cut through my spiral. The GSW in Bay 3 needs a consult. You ready? Gunshot wound. Right. This was my world. Sterile. Ordered. Governed by protocols I understood. Not shadowy nightclubs, and men who spoke in loaded silences. On it, I said, snapping the chart closed. I could rationalize this. I would rationalize this. The stalker was probably scared off by Ji-hoon's confidence, his obvious wealth, his, whatever he was. Maybe he'd just been some obsessive nobody who got bored. Maybe I'd imagined the danger in Ji-hoon's eyes, projected my own fears onto a man who was simply being kind. Kind men didn't have scarred palms and bodyguards in the shadows. I pushed through the trauma bay doors, shoving the thoughts down where they belonged, buried deep with all the other things I couldn't afford to think about. By noon, I'd stitched up 2 lacerations, stabilized a motorcycle accident victim, and talked a panicked mother through her daughter's appendectomy. Routine. Normal. Safe. Then the flowers arrived. Delivery for Amanda Edwards. The courier called from the nurse's station. I looked up from charting to see an enormous bouquet. White peonies and deep crimson roses, arranged with the kind of precision that screamed expensive. The glass vase caught the light, refracting it into fractured rainbows across the counter. My stomach dropped. Who are they from? I asked, my voice coming out sharper than intended. The courier shrugged. No card. Just says to deliver to trauma. Nurse Edwards. Before noon. He held out a tablet. Sign here? My hand trembled as I scrawled my signature. The courier left. The flowers remained, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Someone's got an admirer, Dr. Kim said, passing behind me. About time you got back out there. I couldn't respond, couldn't breathe, because white peonies were my favorite flower, a detail I'd mentioned exactly once, in passing, to a coworker 6 months ago, and I'd never told anyone else, never posted about it, never made it public. He's found a new way to watch me. The stalker. It had to be. Ji-hoon hadn't scared him off. He'd just made him more careful. More invasive. Now he knew where I worked, what I liked. When my shift ended. Amanda, you okay? One of the other nurses touched my shoulder. Fine, I lied. Just unexpected. I left the flowers at the station. Couldn't bring myself to touch them. Couldn't stop looking at them either, their perfect petals like a promise and a threat wrapped in cellophane. The rest of my shift crawled by in a haze of paranoia. Every man who walked through the trauma bay doors made me flinch. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like pursuit. By the time 7 o'clock came and I clocked out, my nerves were stripped raw. I took the back exit, avoided the main lobby, kept my head down as I walked through the hospital's side gate toward the street where I usually caught a cab. Then I saw him. Ji-hoon Han, leaning against a black Mercedes sedan parked directly outside the gates. Same charcoal suit, or maybe a different one cut exactly the same. Arms crossed loosely, expression unreadable, looking like he had every right in the world to be there. Looking like he'd been waiting. My feet stopped moving. My heart didn't. He straightened when he saw me, uncrossing his arms with fluid grace. Amanda, not Miss Edwards, not the nurse from the club, just my name. Spoken like he'd said it 1,000 times before. What are you doing here? I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Making sure you get home safely. I don't need. I stopped, something clicking into place. Are you following me? He tilted his head slightly, considering the question like it was a puzzle with an obvious answer I'd somehow missed. No. Watching. There's a difference. The casual way he said it. No shame, no pretense. Made my blood run cold. That's not better. That's not. I took a step back. That's what stalkers do, Ji-hoon. They watch. Something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt. Something harder. Stalkers watch because they want to possess. I watch because I protect. There's a difference there too. I don't remember asking for your protection. You did. He pushed off the car, taking a single step forward. Not aggressive, just certain. Last night, when you put your hand in mine and asked me to make him stop looking at you, that was asking. For a dance. Not. I gestured helplessly at him, at the car, at the entire insane situation. Not this. The dance was how it started, he said quietly. But men like him don't stop because of a dance, Amanda. They stop because someone makes them stop, permanently. The weight of that word, permanently, settled between us like a body. Did you send me flowers? I asked suddenly. His brow furrowed. No. White peonies and red roses, delivered to the trauma ward. No card. Jihoon's expression darkened. Not anger. Calculation. When? Today. Noon. He pulled out his phone, typed something rapidly, then looked back at me. Get in the car. Excuse me? Get in the car, Amanda. We're not having this conversation on the street. I'm not getting in a car with someone who admits to watching me. The flowers weren't from me, he cut in, his voice taking on an edge that made my spine straighten involuntarily. Which means someone else knows where you work, what you like, and how to get close to you. Someone who isn't afraid of being seen. My mouth went dry. That man from last night. Won't be sending flowers, Jihoon said flatly. Trust me. The certainty in his voice told me exactly why I should trust him on that particular point, and exactly why I should run. But my feet wouldn't move. Because if Jihoon was telling the truth, if the flowers weren't from him, then I had a new problem, a new shadow. And the only person who seemed to know how to deal with shadows was standing in front of me with a car and an offer I couldn't afford to refuse. One ride, I heard myself say. Straight to my apartment, no detours. Agreed. He opened the passenger door. I slid inside before I could change my mind. The interior smelled like leather and something darker. Smoke, maybe. Or the ghost of expensive cologne. Jihoon rounded the car and slipped behind the wheel with practiced ease. The engine purred to life. We pulled into Seoul's evening traffic in silence. I should have been terrified. Should have jumped out at the first red light and run. But something about the way Jihoon drove, controlled, aware, checking mirrors with military precision, made me feel the same thing I'd felt on the dance floor. Safe. Terrifyingly, inexplicably safe. How long? I asked finally. He didn't pretend not to understand. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He'd been watching me for 3 weeks. Before the club. Before I'd ever spoken to him. Why? His jaw tightened. You treated one of my men in the ER. Stab wound to the abdomen. You didn't ask questions. Didn't call the police when you saw the tattoos. Just stitched him up and told him to stay out of trouble. I remembered. 2 months ago, late shift. A man bleeding out on my table with ink crawling up his neck and fear in his eyes. I'd done my job. Nothing more. He could have died if you'd hesitated, Jihoon continued. You didn't. That kind of discretion is rare. So you've been stalking me as a thank you? I've been watching, he corrected, because rare things attract attention, and not all of it is grateful. We pulled up outside my apartment building. Jihoon shifted into park but didn't kill the engine. He turned to face me, and in the dim interior light, his eyes looked less like polished obsidian and more like something molten. I'm not your enemy, Amanda, he said quietly, but I'm not your friend either. What I am is the only thing standing between you and people who've noticed what I noticed. That you're careful, observant, and far too kind for your own good. I don't need protection. You do. Not angry, just certain. You just don't know it yet. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. Matte black, no design. Just a single word embossed in silver. REIGN. Below it, a phone number. If anything feels wrong, he said, pressing the card into my palm. If anyone approaches you, if you get any more unwanted gifts, call me. Not the police. Me. His fingers lingered against mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Warm, scarred, steady, then he released me. I got out of the car on shaking legs, the card burning in my hand, watched him pull away from the curb with the same fluid control he did everything else. The taillights disappeared around the corner, leaving me standing alone in the gathering dark, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the absence of fear, not because the danger was gone, because something more dangerous had decided I was worth protecting. I looked down at the card in my hand. Rain. I should have thrown it away, should have called the police, filed a report, gotten a restraining order. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket and walked inside, already knowing I'd memorized the number. The note was wedged under my windshield wiper like a parking ticket. I almost didn't see it. Morning shift, running late, coffee burning my tongue as I speed walked through the hospital parking garage. But something about the stark white paper against my car's dark paint made me stop. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. Block letters. Printed, not handwritten. 5 words that turned my blood to ice. He can't protect you forever. The coffee slipped from my grip, splashing across concrete. I spun around, scanning the dim garage, rows of cars, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the distant echo of an engine starting. Nothing. No one. But someone had been here. Someone had touched my car. Left this. I was at the police station within the hour. "Ma'am, this could be from anyone," the officer said, barely glancing at the note. The same one who'd dismissed me 2 weeks ago. A disgruntled patient, maybe. "You work in trauma, right? People get emotional." "This isn't about a patient," I interrupted. "Someone's been following me for months. I reported it. You did nothing. Now they're leaving threats on my car." He sighed, the sound of a man who'd heard this story too many times. "Without a direct threat of violence or a clear suspect, there's not much we can do. I can file another report, but you won't actually do anything. We'll increase patrols in your area," he offered, his tone making it clear he wouldn't. "In the meantime, maybe consider varying your routine. Don't park in the same spot. Stay aware of your surroundings." I left the station feeling more helpless than when I'd arrived. The note was now evidence, locked away in a file that would never be opened. And I was still alone. Except I wasn't. Not really. When I got home that evening, Ji-hoon was waiting in the lobby of my apartment building. Not outside, inside. Sitting in one of the worn chairs near the elevator like he belonged there, his charcoal suit immaculate against the faded upholstery. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression told me he'd been there a while. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the small space. I knocked. The building manager let me in. The building manager doesn't just let strangers. I can be very persuasive. He stood, unfolding to his full height with that same fluid grace. "We need to talk." Something inside me snapped. 3 months of fear, 2 police dismissals, mysterious flowers, threatening notes. It all came boiling to the surface. "No," I said, my voice rising. "You need to leave. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm done. The flowers, the watching, now breaking into my building. I didn't send the flowers. Then who did? Because someone knows where I work, where I live, what I like." I pulled the note from my bag, hands shaking as I thrust it toward him. "Someone left this on my car this morning. He can't protect you forever. That's about you, isn't it? This is because of you." Ji-hoon took the note, his expression hardening as he read it. When he looked up, his eyes held something dark and cold. "When did you find this?" "This morning, 7 a.m. And you went to the police?" "Of course I went to the police. What was I supposed to do? Call you? I don't even know you, Ji-hoon. For all I know, you're the one." I stopped, the accusation catching in my throat. "Say it," he said quietly. "Maybe you're the one doing this. Maybe you're my stalker and this is all some sick." "If I were your stalker," Ji-hoon interrupted, his voice dropping to something that made my breath catch, "you would never have seen him alive." The certainty in those words, the absolute, unshakable certainty, froze me in place. He stepped closer. Not threatening, but deliberate. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that I could smell smoke and expensive cologne. Close enough to be dangerous. "I'm not your stalker, Amanda," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like a secret. "But someone is. Someone who knows you're under my protection and wants to see if I'll flinch." "Under your protection," I repeated. "I never agreed to that. You put your hand in mine and asked me to make him stop looking at you. That was agreement enough. For a dance, nothing with me is ever just one thing." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my cheek, calloused and warm. "You asked me to see you, so I do. Every morning when you leave for work. Every evening when you come home. Every moment you think you're alone. I should have been terrified. Should have screamed, 'Run!' Called those useless police back. Instead, my heart hammered for an entirely different reason. "That's not protection," I whispered. "That's obsession." "Yes," he agreed simply. But mine keeps you breathing. His hand dropped from my face, but he didn't step back. The air between us felt charged, heavy with something I didn't want to name. The note is a warning, Ji-hoon continued, his voice returning to that controlled calm. Someone wants me to know they can reach you. That my protection has limits. Then maybe you should stop protecting me. I can't. Why not? For the first time, his composure cracked. Just a fraction. Just enough for me to see something raw and hungry beneath the surface. Because you looked at one of my men, a criminal bleeding out on your table, and treated him like he was worth saving. No one's looked at me like that in a very long time. He stepped back, creating distance that somehow felt more intimate than proximity. You're under my protection now, Amanda, whether you want it or not. He pulled out another card, identical to the one already burning a hole in my pocket, and pressed it into my palm. If anyone approaches you again, call me, not them. His eyes flicked toward the door, toward the police station I'd wasted my morning at. They can't help you. I can. At what cost? The question hung between us. Ji-hoon's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. We'll discuss terms when you're ready to negotiate. Then he was gone, moving past me toward the door with that same controlled grace. I watched him disappear into the Seoul evening, flanked by shadows that had been waiting outside. I looked down at the card in my hand. Rain. This time, I didn't even pretend I wouldn't call. The restaurant didn't have a name. At least, not one displayed anywhere I could see. Just a black door in an upscale district, a small silver plaque with Korean characters I couldn't read, and a man in an immaculate suit who took one look at me and said, "Miss Edwards." "Mr. Han is expecting you." Ji-hoon had called the previous evening, not texted. Called, his voice low and deliberate through the phone. "Have dinner with me." Not a question, but not quite a command either. I should have said no, should have ignored the call entirely. Instead, I'd found myself asking, "Why?" "Because you deserve to eat somewhere that doesn't serve coffee from a vending machine," he'd replied. "And because I'd like to know more about the woman who's been occupying my thoughts." The honesty in that admission had stolen my breath. So here I was, following the suited man through a dimly lit corridor that opened into a space that felt more like a secret than a restaurant. Low lighting, private alcoves separated by rice paper screens, the soft murmur of conversation in multiple languages, wealth whispered from every detail. The silk tablecloths, the hand-painted ceramics, the way the staff moved with choreographed precision. Ji-hoon stood when I approached, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. He'd traded the charcoal suit for midnight blue, the jacket perfectly tailored to his frame. No tie again, just a black shirt open at the collar, revealing those tattoos that curled up his throat like dark flames. His hair was styled back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. He looked like Sin dressed in silk. "Amanda." He pulled out my chair himself, a gesture that felt both chivalrous and possessive. "You look beautiful." I'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress that felt inadequate the moment I'd walked through that door. But the way Ji-hoon's eyes tracked over me made me feel like I was wearing diamonds. "This place is," I trailed off, searching for words. I didn't know places like this existed. They exist for people who know where to look. He settled across from me, movements fluid and controlled. Or people who own them. You own this?" Among other things. A server appeared with wine. No menu, no question. Just a bottle that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ji-hoon nodded approval, and the server poured before disappearing like smoke. I took a sip. It tasted like velvet and starlight. "So," I said, needing to break the intensity of his gaze, "do you bring all the women you stalk to dinner here?" His mouth curved. "Only the ones who accuse me of being their stalker to my face. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the absolute insanity of this situation." I laughed. The sound surprised us both. "Tell me about yourself," Ji-hoon said, leaning back with his wine. "Beyond what I already know, which is that you're a trauma nurse, that you take your coffee with 2 sugars and no cream, that you walk home instead of taking cabs because you like the night air, that you're careful, competent, and far more alone than someone like you should be." The accuracy of his observations should have frightened me. Instead, It felt like being seen for the first time in years. You know, I said slowly, most people consider that stalking. I prefer thorough. Of course you do. Dinner arrived in waves, courses I couldn't name but tasted like art. Ji-hoon watched me eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. And slowly, impossibly, I found myself relaxing. We talked. About soul, about medicine, about the strange isolation of living in a city of millions. Ji-hoon was charming when he wanted to be, asking questions that made me forget I was dining with someone dangerous. His English was perfect, touched with an accent that turned certain words into silk. Why nursing? He asked. Control, I answered honestly. The wine was making me brave. In a trauma bay, everything has a protocol, a solution. Bleeding stops, bones mend, infections clear. It's ordered, predictable. And your life isn't? Not lately. I met his eyes across the table. Not since a certain man made my stalker disappear and decided I needed protection. Do you regret asking me to dance? I considered the question. Considered 3 months of fear versus 3 days of a different kind of tension. Considered the way my heart raced when I saw him versus how it raced when I was alone. I don't know yet, I admitted. Fair enough. He raised his glass in acknowledgement. When dinner ended, Ji-hoon offered his arm. I took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through his jacket. We stepped into the Seoul night, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal. Then the engine roared. It happened fast. A motorbike screaming around the corner, no lights, aimed directly at us. I froze, deer in headlights, my brain unable to process the threat. Ji-hoon moved. One moment I was standing beside him. The next I was pressed against the building, his body a wall between me and the street, his hand cradling the back of my head like something precious. The bike missed us by inches. Ji-hoon's men appeared from nowhere, 2 of them giving chase on foot, another pulling up in a black SUV. And Ji-hoon didn't even look shaken, just adjusted his jacket with one hand while keeping the other on my waist, steadying me. Are you hurt? His voice was calm, too calm. No, what just happened? Get in the car. Not a request. This time, I didn't argue. We rode in silence, Ji-hoon's jaw tight, his fingers drumming against his thigh and the only sign of tension. His phone buzzed twice. He checked it, typed something, then looked at me. They were testing me, he said quietly, seeing how far they could push before I react. Testing you? I almost got killed. No. His voice turned to steel. You were never in danger. I was there. The absolute certainty in that statement should have been arrogant. Instead, it felt like truth. And they failed, he continued, something dark and satisfied coloring his tone. Now they know exactly what happens when someone threatens what's mine. What's mine? Not under my protection. Mine. I turned to look at him. Really look at him. The sharp profile, the controlled fury simmering beneath the surface, the way his hands had moved to shield me without thought. This wasn't just protection. This was something more primal, more absolute, more dangerous. Who are you? I whispered. Ji-hoon met my eyes in the darkness of the car, and for the first time, I saw the truth in them. Not the polished businessman or the charming dinner companion, but something older, harder, forged in violence and survival. I'm the reason Seoul's underworld sleeps with one eye open, he said quietly. I'm the man kings and criminals call when they need problems to disappear. I'm the person you should run from. Amanda Edwards. He reached out, his scarred knuckles brushing my cheek with impossible gentleness. But you won't run. Will you? I should have. God, I should have. Instead, I leaned into his touch, half terrified, half captivated, and whispered, no. His eyes darkened with something hungry and triumphant. Good. Ji-hoon's penthouse was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, the city glittering below like scattered diamonds. Minimalist furniture, black leather, chrome, glass surfaces that reflected light in sharp angles. Art on the walls that probably cost more than my apartment building. But it was the small details that caught my attention. A bookshelf full of worn paperbacks. A jade plant thriving on the windowsill. A photo on the side table. Ji-hoon, younger, laughing with an older man who had the same sharp cheekbones. My father, Ji-hoon said, catching me looking. Before what? Before everything changed. He moved to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of something amber. Before I became Rain. He'd invited me up for coffee after the incident with the motorbike. I'd said yes because the alternative was going home to my empty apartment and reliving the sound of that engine, the feeling of being targeted, and maybe because I was tired of pretending I didn't want to understand him. Ji-hoon handed me the glass. Our fingers brushed, sending electricity up my arm. You can ask, he said. Ask what? What you've been wanting to ask since the restaurant. What I am, what I do. I took a sip of the drink. Whiskey. Smooth and expensive. I'm not sure I'm ready for those answers. But you will be. Not a question, a certainty. He excused himself to take a call, leaving me alone in the vast space. I wandered, drawn to the windows, the view, the sense that I was standing on top of a world I barely understood. Then I saw the desk. Mahogany, expensive, with a laptop closed on top and a single drawer slightly ajar. I shouldn't have looked, shouldn't have touched anything, but something pulled me forward. The drawer opened silently. Inside, a manila folder. Thick, worn at the edges like it had been opened many times. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Photos. Dozens of them. Me leaving the hospital. Me at the cafe. Me walking home at dusk. Unaware of the camera tracking my movements. Different angles, different days, different clothes. My apartment building from across the street. My car in the parking garage. My bedroom window. The room spun. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering against the floor in an explosion of crystal and whiskey. Amanda. I spun to find Ji-hoon in the doorway, phone still in hand, his expression shifting from concern to something harder when he saw what I was holding. It was you, I whispered, my voice breaking. All along. The watching. The stalking. It was you. Amanda, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been stalking me for months? That every moment of protection was just... I threw the folder at him, photos scattering across the expensive floor like evidence of betrayal. You made me feel crazy for being paranoid when you were the one watching me the entire time. I was protecting you. From who? Yourself? Tears burned my eyes. You said if you were my stalker, I'd never have seen him alive. Was that supposed to be a confession? Ji-hoon moved toward me, hands raised in a gesture meant to calm, but I saw him differently now, saw the predator beneath the silk. You shouldn't have found those, he said, his voice low and controlled. That's what you have to say? Not, I'm sorry or I can explain, just that I shouldn't have found your surveillance photos of me? They're not what you think. Then what are they, Ji-hoon? What possible explanation justifies this? Something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, resignation. They're evidence, he said quietly, of every time my men stopped someone from getting too close. Every near miss, every threat I neutralized before you even knew it existed. I stared at him, my breath coming in short gasps. You see surveillance? He continued, taking another step closer. I see proof of what I've kept you safe from. I don't believe you. I'm not asking you to. He reached down, picking up one of the photos, and he leaving the hospital at dusk. This was taken the night a rival syndicate's scout was tracking you. He's no longer a problem. Another photo. This one, a con artist targeting foreign nurses. He's in a hospital now. Different kind. Another. This one. Stop. I backed toward the door, every instinct screaming at me to run. Just stop. I can't. I need to leave. Amanda. Don't. I held up a hand, vision blurring with tears. Don't say my name like that. Like you didn't just... I couldn't finish. Couldn't breathe. I turned and ran. Ji-hoon called after me, but I didn't stop. Didn't look back. Just ran for the elevator, stabbed the button with shaking fingers, and prayed the doors would close before he could follow. They did. I made it to the street, flagged a cab, gave my address through tears the driver pretended not to see. My apartment was dark and cold when I arrived. I locked every lock, checked every window, and collapsed on my couch with my phone in my hand. I should call the police, show them the photos. Finally have proof that I wasn't crazy, that someone really had been watching, but Ji-hoon's words echoed in my head. They're evidence of what I've kept you safe from. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not Jihoon's. I almost didn't answer. But something made me press accept. Hello? Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice. Distorted. Mechanical. Wrong. He can't find you this time, Amanda. The line went dead. I sat frozen, phone pressed to my ear, as the realization crashed over me like ice water. The photos. The surveillance. Jihoon's men tracking my movements. He wasn't lying. He really had been protecting me from something worse. And now, for the first time in weeks, I was truly alone. My phone buzzed again. A text from Jihoon's number. Where are you? Then another. Amanda, answer me. And finally, stay inside. Lock your doors. I'm coming. I looked at the darkness pressing against my windows, at the photos, still burned into my memory, at the terrifying space between protection and possession, and I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd run from the only person keeping me alive. The power went out at 11:47 p.m. One moment I was staring at Jihoon's texts, trying to decide whether to respond. The next, my apartment plunged into darkness so absolute I couldn't see my own hands. Just a breaker, I whispered to myself. Just the building's terrible electrical. The door splintered inward. No warning, no knock, just the violent crack of wood giving way, and then hands, rough, gloved, were grabbing me. I screamed, but something pressed over my mouth, chemical sweet, burning my throat. The world tilted, darkened further. When I woke, everything hurt. My head throbbed. My wrists burned where zip ties cut into skin. I was on a concrete floor, cold seeping through my clothes, the smell of rust and old oil thick in the air. A warehouse. Abandoned, judging by the broken windows high above and the graffiti-stained walls. She's awake. The voice came from the shadows. Korean, accented differently than Jihoon's. Harder, colder. A man stepped into the weak moonlight filtering through the windows. Mid-30s, lean, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His suit was expensive but worn, like he'd stolen it from someone who mattered. Amanda Edwards, he said, crouching in front of me. Rain's little nurse. Do you know how long I've been watching you? My throat closed. You're Jin-tae? He smiled. And it was nothing like Jihoon's dangerous curve. This was rot disguised as charm. The man whose existence your precious protector tried to erase. The man who's been following you since the night you stitched up one of his dogs. The ER. The man with tattoos and a stab wound. You were there, I whispered. I'm always there. Jin-tae reached out, his fingers grazing my cheek in a mockery of Jihoon's gentleness. Watching, waiting, learning all your pretty little routines. The flowers, the note on my car. Guilty. He stood, circling me like a predator. You see, Rain thought he could protect you by keeping you close, but he made a critical error. What error? Jin-tae's smile widened. He let you see him, let you matter. And now, when I put a bullet in your head, he'll finally understand what it feels like to lose something precious. Terror flooded through me, cold and absolute. You were never the prize, Amanda. You're the warning. He pulled out a phone, typing something with casual efficiency. I've just sent your location to Rain. He'll come for you, of course. They always do when you take their toys. I'm not his. Oh, but you are. Jin-tae crouched again, his breath hot against my face. You just don't understand what that means yet. He's not a man, Amanda. He's a king. And kings don't negotiate. They conquer. He stood, gesturing to someone in the shadows. Another man appeared. Bigger, silent, holding a gun, with professional ease. Watch her. When Rain arrives, you know what to do. Jin-tae walked away, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. I was left alone with the guard, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Think. My hands were bound. The guard was armed. The warehouse had multiple exits, but I was in the center, exposed. Then I felt it, the weight around my wrist, the bracelet. Jihoon had given it to me at dinner, a delicate silver thing I'd assumed was just jewelry. Consider it a gift, he'd said, for protection. I'd thought he meant symbolically. Now, feeling the slight warmth against my skin, I understood. GPS. He'd put a tracker on me. Call me, not them. I couldn't call. But maybe the bracelet was enough. Maybe his men were already mobilizing. Maybe. The guard's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then looked at me with something like pity. They're coming, he said in broken English. You should pray they get here fast. They came like shadows given form. One moment, the warehouse was silent except for my breathing and the guard's footsteps. The next, the lights. What few worked. Exploded in showers of sparks. Gunfire. Shouting. The guard beside me spun, raising his weapon, but never got the chance to fire. A figure moved through the darkness. Fluid. Lethal. Impossibly fast. The guard dropped without a sound. Then silence. Heavy. Waiting. Amanda. Jihoon's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Not loud. Not panicked. Just my name. Spoken with an intensity that made my breath catch. He stepped into the moonlight, and I forgot how to breathe. Blood spattered his shirt. His knuckles were raw. His eyes, those dark, fathomless eyes, burned with something primal and terrifying. He looked like vengeance wearing a three-piece suit. Jihoon? He was on his knees beside me in seconds, his hands. Still warm, still scarred. Cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence radiating from him. Did they hurt you? His voice cracked on the question. Amanda, did they? No, I'm okay. He pulled me against his chest, his arms crushing me close like he was trying to physically hold me together. I felt him trembling. Actually trembling. You shouldn't have run, he whispered into my hair. You shouldn't have left. I know, I'm sorry. Gunfire erupted from the far end of the warehouse. Jihoon moved, positioning his body between me and the threat, his hand finding a gun I hadn't seen him carrying. He fired twice. 2 bodies dropped. I stared at him. At the man who'd bought me dinner and quoted poetry, now executing threats with surgical precision. Don't look, he said, his free hand covering my eyes. Don't watch this part. But I already had. And God help me, I wasn't frightened. I was captivated. More of his men appeared. Silent. Efficient. Wearing the same dark suits and empty expressions. They moved through the warehouse like they'd rehearsed this, clearing rooms and securing exits with military precision. Jintae's voice echoed from somewhere above. You think this is over, Rain? She's already dead. Jihoon's jaw tightened. He looked up at the catwalks, his expression turning to something arctic and absolute. Stay here, he told me. My men will protect you. Don't. But he was already gone, moving up a rusted staircase with the same lethal grace. I watched him disappear into the shadows, my heart in my throat. Seconds passed, then minutes, then a scream, cut short, followed by the heavy sound of something hitting concrete. Silence. Jihoon reappeared on the catwalk, alone, wiping blood from his knuckles with a handkerchief. He descended slowly, each step deliberate, until he stood in front of me again. It's done, he said quietly. You're safe. I should have asked what happened, should have demanded details. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. How long have you been watching me? Jihoon knelt again, his hands finding mine, carefully cutting through the zip ties with a knife that appeared from nowhere. Since the night you saved one of mine in the ER, he admitted, rubbing feeling back into my wrists with infinite gentleness. He was bleeding out. You didn't even flinch at the blood. Didn't ask questions. Just stitched him up and told him to stay out of trouble. He looked up at me, and in the fractured moonlight, his eyes held something raw. You treated a criminal like he was worth saving. No one's ever looked at me like that, Amanda. Like I might be worth saving too. My breath caught. So you've been protecting me. Since that night. Yes. His thumb traced circles on my wrist, over the bracelet that had saved my life. I couldn't let you go. Couldn't let anyone else see what I saw. That's not protection, Jihoon. That's obsession, he finished. I know. I've never pretended to be anything else. He stood, pulling me to my feet, his hands steadying me when my legs threatened to give out. Around us, his men moved with quiet efficiency, clearing evidence, erasing the night like it had never happened. Come, Jihoon said, his arm settling around my waist. Let's go home. I should have asked where home was. Should have insisted on going to my apartment, my life, my world. Instead, I leaned into his warmth and let him lead me into the dawn. Behind us, Seoul burned with the consequences of threatening what belonged to Rain. Jihoon's mansion wasn't a home. It was a fortress. High walls, security cameras, men stationed at every entrance. I'd been here 3 days, recovering from the abduction, trying to process the reality of my new existence. The woman who'd been kidnapped wasn't the same one who'd woken up in silk sheets, surrounded by luxury and danger in equal measure. That woman had been naive, frightened, alone. This woman understood that safety came with a price, and his name was Rain. "You're awake." I turned from the window to find Jihoon in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He'd traded his blood-spattered suit for black slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the full extent of his tattoos. Dragons and phoenixes curled up his forearms, Korean script wrapped around his wrists, art and violence inked into his skin like a history book written in pain. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Too quiet." "You're safe here." "I know." And I did. That was the terrifying part. "Tell me about Rain." Jihoon set down the coffee, his expression shifting to something guarded. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Who you really are. How you became this." He was silent for a long moment, staring out at the Seoul skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice held the weight of years. "My father was Han Min-jun, a businessman, legitimate, respected. When I was 19, a rival syndicate decided his shipping company was useful. They made an offer. He refused." Jihoon's jaw tightened. "They killed him in front of me, made me watch. Then they gave me a choice. Take his place in their organization, or join him in the ground. Oh, Jihoon. I took the third option." His voice turned to steel. "I killed them all. Every single person involved in his murder. Then I took their territory, their connections, their power." He turned to face me, and I saw the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. Rain wasn't a name I chose. It was a title I earned through blood. The underworld needed a king after I burned the old regime to ash. So, I became one. I moved toward him, my hands finding his. "You can't protect me by killing everything that threatens me." "Can't I?" His fingers tightened around mine. "I've built an empire on that principle, Amanda. Everything I am, everything I've done. It's all been to ensure no one ever makes me helpless again. But you can't kill the whole world." "I'd try." He pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. "For you, I'd try. That's not love, Jihoon. That's obsession, possession. I know." His breath ghosted across my lips. "I told you I was dangerous, that you should run. But you didn't. You stayed. Even after seeing what I am, what I'm capable of, you stayed. Because you saved me." "No." His hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. "You stayed because you understand. That in my world, love and violence are inseparable. That I kill so you can sleep. That I watch so you can breathe. That I own you so no one else ever can." The truth of it stole my breath. Because he was right. I did understand. And God help me, I didn't want to leave. "Then what does that make me?" I whispered. Jihoon's mouth curved into something almost tender. "Mine." He kissed me then. Slow, deliberate, tasting of coffee and dark promises. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me like something precious and profane. When we finally broke apart, Seoul glittered behind him like scattered diamonds. "I have a meeting tonight," he said, his voice rough. "Syndicate business. You should stay here." "No." He blinked. "Amanda, you said I'm yours. That means I stand beside you, not behind you, not hidden away where it's safe." I met his eyes with a certainty I hadn't known I possessed. "If I'm going to be part of your world, then let me be part of it, all of it." Something fierce and proud blazed in his expression. "You understand what you're asking?" "Yes. There's no going back after this. You'll be marked as mine. Protected, yes, but also targeted. Everyone who wants to hurt me will see you as the fastest route." "I know." Jihoon studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then tonight, you'll sit beside me, silent, observant. The woman even kings fear to look at too long." That evening, I dressed in black. A gift from Jihoon, silk and simple elegance. He fastened a necklace around my throat, diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. "Remember," he murmured against my ear. "You don't speak. You don't react. You simply exist beside me. That alone will send a message." "What message?" His lips curved against my skin. "That rain has chosen, and woe to anyone who threatens what's his." The meeting was held in a private room in the same restaurant where we'd had dinner. Men in expensive suits filled the space. Korean, Chinese, Japanese, all radiating the same controlled violence. They stood when Ji-hoon entered, every single one, and when I walked in beside him, their eyes widened in recognition and something like fear. Ji-hoon pulled out my chair himself. I sat, hands folded in my lap, expression neutral. While the most dangerous men in Seoul watched and understood, the nurse who'd been hunted was gone. In her place sat the woman the king protected. And that, the silence said, made me untouchable. 5 months later, we returned to Velvet Halo. The same golden chandeliers, the same dim blue lights, the same pulse of bass through expensive floors, but everything had changed. I wore red tonight, a dress that whispered rather than screamed, custom-made to fit like a second skin. Diamonds glittered at my throat and wrists, gifts from a man who expressed love through beautiful, dangerous things. Ji-hoon walked beside me, his hand at the small of my back, possessive, protective, proud. His world had become mine. His enemies knew my face. His empire included my name. I was no longer the frightened nurse seeking safety in a dance. I was the woman who'd learned to dance with darkness itself. Nostalgic? Ji-hoon murmured as we entered the club. Should I be? This is where you asked a stranger to save you. His lips brushed my ear. Where everything began. No. I turned to face him, my hand finding his cheek. It began the night I saved one of yours. The rest was just catching up. His eyes darkened with that familiar hunger. Dance with me? I thought you'd never ask. We moved to the floor, and the crowd parted. They always did now. Whether because of Ji-hoon's reputation or mine, I no longer knew, no longer cared. The song was slow, intimate, the same one that had played that first night. Ji-hoon pulled me close, and we moved like we'd been doing this for years. In a way, we had. This dance had been inevitable from the moment our eyes met. Someone's watching, Ji-hoon said softly, his gaze flicking to a man at the bar. Too interested, too focused. I smiled, the expression holding none of the fear it once would have. Then maybe we should dance. But this time, I led. My hand guided his. My steps dictated his. My body controlled the space between us. Ji-hoon followed, amusement and pride flickering in his expression. You've changed, he observed. You changed me. Regrets? I considered the question. Considered the woman I'd been. Alone, frightened, hunted. Considered the woman I'd become. Protected, powerful, partnered with a king who'd burn the world for me. None, I whispered. Not a single one. The song shifted, swelling toward its crescendo. I pulled Ji-hoon closer, our bodies moving as one beneath the fractured light of the chandeliers. You said a stalker was watching. I murmured against his throat. You were right, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Was it you? His arms tightened around me, his lips finding my temple with devastating tenderness. Always. I tilted my head back, meeting those dark eyes that had first promised protection and delivered so much more. Then don't stop watching. Never. We danced as the club pulsed around us, two shadows moving like one, love and danger fused so completely they couldn't be separated. When the song ended, Ji-hoon didn't release me, just held me there, in the center of the floor, while Seoul's underworld watched and understood. This was no ordinary love. This was obsession refined into devotion, possession transformed into partnership, violence made tender through the simple act of choosing each other, again and again, despite everything. The chandelier light reflected in Ji-hoon's eyes, turning them molten gold. In that moment, I saw everything we were and everything we'd become. Fear turned to power, darkness into devotion, a stalker into a savior, or perhaps the reverse. I no longer knew. It didn't matter, because somewhere between the first dance and this one, I'd learned the truth that Ji-hoon had known all along. Sometimes the only safety is in the arms of the most dangerous man in the room. Sometimes protection looks like possession. Sometimes love wears the face of obsession. And sometimes, When a stranger asks, "Could you dance with me?" A stalker's watching, the only right answer is yes. Even. Especially. When that stranger becomes the stalker himself. We left Velvet Halo as dawn crept over Seoul, the city waking to a new day that we'd already lived through. Jihoon's car waited at the curb, his men forming a protective wall that parted only for us. "Home?" he asked. I looked at the man who'd saved me, stalked me, claimed me, and transformed me into something I'd never imagined becoming. The man whose darkness I'd learned to dance with, the man I'd chosen to love despite, or perhaps because of, everything he was. "Yes," I said, my hand finding his. "Home." Because home wasn't a place anymore. It was the space between protection and possession, the distance between fear and desire. The moment when you put your hand in a stranger's and realize they've been watching you all along, and you wouldn't have it any other way. We drove into the Seoul morning, two silhouettes against the rising sun. Love and violence braided so tightly they'd become the same thing. And behind us, in the empty club, the chandeliers caught the dawn light and scattered it across the floor where we'd first danced. The floor where everything had begun. The floor where, 5 months later, everything had come full circle. The story of the nurse and the king, the woman and rain, the dance that never truly ended.